Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into another fascinating topic. Today, we're tackling something I know a lot of folks are curious about, the link between obesity and diabetes.
Definitely a hot topic, and rightfully so.
I thought I had a decent grasp on it already, weight gain, blood sugar issues, the basics. But wow, the research you sent over is packed with surprising connections.
It's a lot more complex than most people realize, and there are a ton of myths floating around, too.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely be busting some myths later on. But first, let's paint a picture of what we're dealing with here. I gotta admit, one thing that blew my mind was discovering that fat cells aren't just these inert blobs. They're like little hormone factories messing with your blood sugar.
Right. Tiny troublemakers. And that's a key piece of the puzzle when you think about the obesity epidemic we're facing. It's not just about how we look, it's a serious health crisis with far-reaching consequences.
Okay, so we all know obesity is a problem, but can you give us some sense of the scale of the issue? I was floored by some of the stats in the article.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty alarming. In the U.S. alone, over 42% of adults are classified as obese, and globally, it's a full-blown epidemic.
Wow. But it's not just about the number on the scale, right? There's more to it than just being overweight.
Exactly. We need to go beyond BMI, which is a pretty simplistic measure. What really matters is excess fat, especially the kind that builds up around your organs, called visceral fat.
Visceral fat. That sounds kind of ominous.
It is. It's like having packing peanuts surrounding your vital organs, disrupting their function and sending your metabolism out of whack. And get this, it's metabolically active, meaning it's constantly churning out substances that interfere with how your body processes sugar.
So it's like a stealthy saboteur working against you from the inside.
Exactly. And it raises the big question. Why are we in this obesity epidemic in the first place?
Right, because it feels like there's more to it than just people being lazy or overeating. The article talked about a bunch of contributing factors, like a perfect storm pushing us toward weight gain.
It's this complex web of our biology, environment, and even our psychology. For starters, we live in a world of food abundance. It's everywhere, and often it's engineered to be hyperpalatable. You know, triggering those reward centers in our brains, making us want to eat more and more.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well, like when you can't stop at just one potato chip.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Our ancestors had to work hard to find food, and it wasn't always the tastiest or most calorie-dense. But now we're surrounded by cheap, processed foods designed to make us overeat. And to make matters worse, our lifestyles have become incredibly sedentary.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of spending way too much time sitting at my desk.
Most of us are. We're not moving nearly as much as our bodies are designed to, which throws our energy balance even further out of whack.
So we're eating more, moving less. But is that the whole story?
Well, there's also the genetic component. Some people are simply predisposed to gaining weight more easily than others. It's not a destiny, but it's like starting a race a few steps behind the starting line.
Okay, so some people have to work a bit harder to stay at a healthy weight, but having those genes doesn't mean you're doomed to be obese. Right.
Definitely not. There's a lot you can do to counteract those predispositions. But then we have to consider the psychological side of things.
You mean like stress eating? I know I tend to reach for the cookie jar when deadlines are looming.
Right. Stress, boredom, sadness. Many of us turn to food for comfort or distraction. It's a natural human response, but it can definitely contribute to overeating and weight gain.
So it's like this combination of biology, psychology, and then there's also our environment.
Exactly. We're bombarded with advertising for unhealthy food, portion sizes have ballooned, and healthy, affordable options are often harder to find. It's a system that makes it tough to make good choices, even when you're trying your best.
Okay, so we've got this perfect storm creating this obesity epidemic. But how does all of this tie into diabetes? I know there's a connection, but can you walk us through that link?
That's where it gets really interesting. Diabetes isn't just about sugar intake. It's about how our bodies process sugar. And that's where obesity plays a crucial role.
All right, well, now I'm even more intrigued. Let's dive into that in the next part. Okay, so we left off talking about this link between obesity and diabetes. I feel like most people know there's a connection, but I'll admit I don't fully understand how it all works.
Right, yeah, it's definitely complex, but let's start with the basics. So diabetes is a condition where your body can't properly process glucose, sugar. And that leads to high blood sugar levels, which can cause all sorts of complications.
Okay, so high blood sugar, bad news. But isn't there more than one type of diabetes?
You're right, there are actually two main types, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease. So basically, your body attacks the cells in your pancreas that produce insulin.
And insulin is the hormone that regulates blood sugar.
Exactly. So in type 1, your body just can't make enough insulin.
Got it.
But type 2 diabetes, which is the one most closely linked to obesity, is a bit different. In this case, your body still produces insulin, but your cells become resistant to it.
Insulin resistance. That's the term I always hear, but I'm not sure I really understand what it means.
Okay, well, imagine insulin is like a key that unlocks your cells to let glucose in for energy.
Mm-hmm.
With insulin resistance, it's like the lock has become rusty, so the key doesn't work as well.
Oh, okay.
And so the glucose builds up in your bloodstream instead of getting into your cells, and that leads to high blood sugar.
Okay, that makes sense. So with type 2 diabetes, it's not necessarily a lack of insulin. It's more like your body isn't using it effectively.
Exactly. And here's where obesity really comes into play. Remember that visceral fat we talked about?
Uh-huh.
That's a major culprit in driving insulin resistance.
So those little hormone factories are back to cause more trouble.
Yep. They release these substances called adipokines. And these adipokines interfere with insulin signaling pathways, making your cells less responsive to insulin.
So it's like the adipokines are sabotaging the whole lock and key system.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, obesity also triggers chronic inflammation throughout the body. And that inflammation further damages the cells involved in insulin production.
It's like a double whammy on your blood sugar control.
Right. And your pancreas, it tries to compensate by producing more and more insulin to overcome the resistance. But eventually it just gets overworked and can't keep up. That's when you develop full-blown type 2 diabetes.
Wow, so it's like this cascade of events all stemming from obesity. And I remember the article mentioning a pretty shocking statistic about this.
Yeah, over 90% of people with type 2 diabetes are overweight or obese. So that's a very strong link.
Yeah, no kidding. It's clear that obesity significantly increases your risk of diabetes. But what I found really fascinating was this idea that diabetes can then worsen obesity. Like it creates this vicious cycle.
Ah, yes, the vicious cycle. This is where it gets really tricky. Because of the insulin resistance,
Yeah.
your body has these high levels of insulin circulating, and insulin, in addition to regulating blood sugar, also promotes fat storage.
Wait, so the hormone that's supposed to help us use sugar is also making us store more fat?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, but yes.
Oh.
And the more insulin resistant you are, the higher your insulin levels tend to be, and the more likely you are to gain weight, especially around the abdomen.
So it's like this feedback loop that just keeps spiraling out of control.
Exactly.
Oh.
And then you add in all the other aspects of diabetes that can make weight management even harder. So like fatigue is a common symptom.
Oh, yeah.
And that makes it really difficult to find the energy to exercise.
I can definitely relate to that. When I'm tired, the last thing I want to do is work out.
Right. And then there's the issue of fluctuating hunger hormones due to high blood sugar. And that can lead to like intense cravings and overeating.
So you're tired, you're craving sugary foods, your body is primed to store fat. That's a recipe for disaster.
It can definitely feel that way. And then to top it all off, your metabolism slows down as you gain weight, making it even harder to lose those extra pounds. It's like you're fighting an uphill battle.
It all sounds so bleak, but the article did offer some hope, right? It talked about ways to break this cycle. Tell me there's something we can do.
Oh, absolutely. While the relationship between obesity and diabetes is complex and challenging, it's not a life sentence. There's a lot you can do to lower your risk or manage these conditions, and it doesn't have to involve drastic measures. Small, consistent changes can have a huge impact.
Okay, that's reassuring. So what are these magic steps to break free from this vicious cycle? The article mentioned weight loss, but I'm guessing it's more nuanced than just eat less, move more.
You're right. It's about making sustainable lifestyle changes that address all the factors we've been discussing: diet, exercise, stress management, and even sleep.
Well, let's break it down then. Give us the actionable steps. What can people actually do to start making a difference?
Okay, let's start with weight loss. Losing even a small amount of weight, say 5 to 10% of your body weight, can significantly improve insulin sensitivity and lower your risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Okay, 5 to 10%, that feels achievable. But how do we get there? The article talked about low-carb and low-GI diets. Can you explain what those are and how they can help?
Sure. Low-carb diets restrict the amount of carbohydrates you consume, forcing your body to burn fat for fuel instead of relying on glucose. Low GI diets focus on foods that release sugar into the bloodstream slowly, preventing those rapid spikes in blood sugar that can be problematic for people with diabetes.
So it's not just about cutting out carbs altogether, it's about choosing the right kind of carbs.
Exactly. Think whole grains over refined grains. vegetables over sugary fruits, and lean protein over processed meats. So for example, instead of white rice, try quinoa or brown rice. Instead of a sugary cereal for breakfast, opt for a bowl of oatmeal with berries and nuts.
Those are some great swaps. And what about low GI? What are some examples of foods that fit into that category?
Lentils, beans, chickpeas, sweet potatoes, even plain yogurt are all good options. They provide sustained energy without causing those drastic swings in blood sugar.
So it's about making smarter choices within each food group. But I have to admit, I have a major sweet tooth. What about sugar? The article mentioned cutting back on sugary drinks. Is that really necessary?
Cutting back on sugary drinks is one of the single most impactful things you can do to improve your health, especially if you're at risk for diabetes. Sodas, sweetened teas, even fruit juices are loaded with sugar and can wreak havoc on your blood sugar levels.
Okay, no more soda. But what about my daily latte? I need my caffeine fix.
I hear you. You don't have to give up coffee entirely, but be mindful of added sugars. Try unsweetened almond milk or a sugar-free sweetener instead of those sugary syrups. And speaking of sugar, portion control is crucial even with healthy foods.
Right, I guess you can overdo it on nuts and avocado toast even though they're considered healthy fats.
Exactly. Everything in moderation. And when it comes to fats, focus on healthy fats, like those found in olive oil, avocados, nuts, and fatty fish.
Got it. So we've talked about weight loss and diet, but what about exercise? I know it's important, but sometimes it feels like such a chore.
I understand. I understand. But the good news is you don't have to become a marathon runner to reap the benefits. Aim for at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise most days of the week. And remember, exercise doesn't have to mean hitting the gym. It could be a brisk walk, a bike ride, a dance class, or even gardening. Find something you enjoy and can stick with.
Okay, 30 minutes, I can handle that. But let's be real. Some days are just crazy busy. What about those days when you can't squeeze in a full workout?
Any movement is better than none. Take the stairs instead of the elevator, park farther away from your destination, walk around while you're on the phone. Little things like that can add up over time.
I like that. It's about making movement a part of your everyday life. Now, the article also touched on something I don't usually associate with obesity or diabetes: stress management. How does that fit into the picture?
Well, stress hormones like cortisol can actually increase insulin resistance and contribute to weight gain, especially around the abdomen.
Seriously, so stressing out about my weight could actually be making it harder to lose weight.
It's a cruel irony, but yes.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to find healthy ways to manage stress, whether it's through exercise, meditation, deep breathing techniques, or spending time in nature.
Stress management dot noted. And then there's sleep. I know sleep is important for overall health, but does it really play a role in obesity and diabetes?
Absolutely. When you're sleep deprived, your body produces more of the hunger hormone ghrelin and less of the satiety hormone leptin, making you feel hungrier and more likely to overeat. Plus, lack of sleep can also worsen insulin sensitivity.
Wow. I never realized how much sleep could impact these conditions. So we're talking about aiming for a solid 7 to 8 hours a night.
Ideally, yes. Create a relaxing bedtime routine, avoid caffeine and alcohol before bed, and make sure your bedroom is dark, cool, and quiet.
Okay, all good advice. But what about people who are already doing all these things? Eating well, exercising, managing stress, and still struggling. The article mentioned medical interventions. Can you elaborate on that?
Of course. Sometimes lifestyle changes alone aren't enough, and that's where medication or other medical interventions can be helpful. There are medications that can help improve insulin sensitivity and lower blood sugar levels.
So it's not a failure if you need a little extra help.
Not at all. And in some cases, bariatric surgery might be an option, but that's usually reserved for people with severe obesity who haven't had success with other methods.
Right. It's about working with your doctor to find the best approach for your individual situation.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, I think it's important to address some common misconceptions about obesity and diabetes. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and it can be really confusing and discouraging.
Yes, please. Let's debunk some myths. I think this will be really helpful for people to hear.
Okay, one common myth is that only overweight people get diabetes. While obesity is a major risk factor, it's not the only one. Genetics, age, family history, and even certain ethnicities can all play a role. You can develop type 2 diabetes even if you're not significantly overweight.
So it's not just about what you look like on the outside.
Not at all. Another myth is that you need to lose a ton of weight to make a difference. But as we discussed earlier, even losing a small amount of weight can have a significant impact on your health and reduce your risk.
That's so important to remember. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and think, what's the point if I can't lose 50 pounds? but every little bit counts.
Absolutely. And finally, we need to address the myth that eating sugar directly causes diabetes. While sugary drinks and processed foods can contribute to weight gain and increase your risk, it's not as simple as sugar equals diabetes.
I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions out there.
Yeah, it's about the bigger picture. Your overall diet, your lifestyle, your genetics, focusing on a balanced diet, regular exercise, stress management, and good sleep habits is far more effective than simply demonizing sugar.
So it's about making informed choices and creating a sustainable approach to healthy living.
Precisely. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. There are resources available, communities to support you, and healthcare professionals who can guide you every step of the way.
This has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I've learned so much about the connection between obesity and diabetes, and more importantly, what we can actually do to take control of our health.
I'm glad to hear that. Knowledge is power. And by understanding the complexities of these conditions, you can make empowered choices for a healthier future.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. In our final part, let's wrap up this deep dive with some key takeaways and a thought-provoking question to leave you pondering. Stay tuned. All right, we've really unpacked a lot when it comes to obesity and diabetes, from those sneaky fat cells to the vicious cycle that can link these two conditions. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key things you hope our listeners walk away understanding?
I think the biggest takeaway is that while obesity and diabetes are serious health concerns, they're not insurmountable challenges. We've learned that even small, consistent changes in your daily habits can make a real difference.
It really is empowering to realize we have more control than we might think. It's not about being perfect. It's about making those small, sustainable changes, like swapping that sugary soda for water or taking a quick walk after dinner.
Exactly. It's about building those healthy habits into your life, bit by bit. And another important point I hope people remember is that it's not just about individual willpower. We have to acknowledge the influence of our environment, and the systems that make it harder to make those healthy choices.
It's like we're all swimming in the sea of fast food and tempting treats. It takes a conscious effort to go against the current, but it's possible. And we've got research and medical advancements on our side to help us navigate those tricky waters.
That's a great analogy. We're not alone in this journey. There are resources available, communities to support you, and healthcare professionals who can provide personalized guidance.
So before we sign off, I want to leave our listener with a question to ponder. We've learned so much about what we should be doing, but what's one small change you, dear listener, can commit to making today? To break free from this cycle or simply move in a healthier direction?
I love that question. It doesn't have to be a huge overhaul, just one small step forward. Maybe it's adding an extra serving of veggies to your dinner tonight, or taking the stairs instead of the elevator. Every little bit counts.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Reach out to a friend, join a support group, or talk to your doctor. We're all in this together. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay healthy.